Hi, everyone.
Greetings all.
We're in the Pure Worship book. I wanted to show you a picture. We're only going to deal with this one page, page 120. This is the picture. You'll see a man sitting at a table, and he looks pretty serious-minded.
An older man for once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then underneath you see the same man in a crowd of witnesses singing and looking happy, looking rather serious-minded, and then really happy in the bottom. So we wanted to talk about this, but we'll read what they say. And their point is, the reason they put it in here is I'll read this thing that it says, help to get back on our feet. We can be strengthened by reflecting on the lesson from this impressive vision recorded at Ezekiel 37, 1-14, about the bones coming to life. A lesson that we can apply to our personal circumstances. What is it? And they've got 2 paragraphs. At times we may feel so overwhelmed by pressures and trials in our life that we are worn out and we struggle to go on. However, at such moments we may be fortified if we reflect on the vivid description in Ezekiel's restoration vision. Why? We can learn from this prophecy that a God who has the power to breathe life into dead bones can surely give us the strength we need to overcome obstacles, even those that, humanly speaking, are insurmountable. And they encourage you to read Psalm 18:29 and Philippians 4:13.
Yeah, I can read that last text anyway, because I think it's the equivalent, shorter and more memorable than the one that they cite in Psalms.
Okay.
And that is, Paul, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Now, what are you using this for? To prove that Jehovah's on your side? Yes, but what's the problem with the Watchtower? And I think the very fact they've got an elderly man who is obviously discouraged in the first picture and then seemingly happy again when he's at the Kingdom Hall singing, with everybody else smiling, of course, beside.
I think he's a worn out person. I think it's interesting they use that word, worn out, because people do get worn out if they've been trying to keep going for decades.
Because you told them?
It's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen.
While you're
any
young.
minute.
While you're a young man.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now you know, and I know you're one of your anecdotes that resonates with me is about somebody, a pioneer that we knew, who told you about his impression, why he was no longer going to the Kingdom Hall. This would be in the mid-'80s, right?
Yeah, it was before we left, well before we left, and he'd stopped going. We did he was a friend, so we were talking with him, visiting with him. And he said that the reason he left was because he thinks the witnesses are just an unhappy group of people. And we were kind of surprised. I mean, we were in the center of things and quite happy.
Quite happy. We were happy.
Say we were happy, blindly, and just didn't. I didn't have any doubts at that point.
At that point.
But he says, just look at the people during a meeting. He said, don't look at them when they're coming in or when they're singing their songs. Look at them, just turn and look at them during a meeting, he said. They just look miserable, right? He says they just look depressed. And he says, I look at friends of ours, and he would name some people that we knew that pioneered with us. And he says, I look at them and I think, this brother has been working for decades as a pioneer and has very little results for it. And if they're not miserable and unhappy, kind of sad, just sort of depressed, they're arrogant and judgmental.
Yeah, even
he
comparing
said, I just don't want to be with that kind of people anymore.
Yeah, even if they're not miserable all the time, they're often very bitter and very judgmental of their fellow witnesses. Now, I knew that 15 years before this particular pioneer told us this little story. because when I started pioneering in the early 70s, we had lots of pioneers and some older ones who were still pioneering, or elders in the congregation, who had been there since Rutherford's days. This would be about 1971, 72. And they had that spirit. If they weren't downright depressed, then they weren't usually in the early 70s, because this was the build-up to 1975, of course. But they were very negative. And even the elders I met, they were very critical of each other. And one elder told me about, he was a Bethel elder, by the way, he told me about the presiding overseer. This is going back before the elder arrangement came in. He said, our presiding overseer, David, you don't know this, but he's got a real drinking problem. And I thought, whoa, I'm kind of impressed by this man. He seems quite happy to me, but no, he's got this serious drinking problem. Then I hear more, as years go on, I hear more of these stories about people with drinking problems.
I definitely became familiar with that, people with drinking problems, but also with depression. And I think you always think it's just a one-off. It's this person or that person. You don't think it's occurring more and more among Jehovah's Witnesses. So that escaped my attention. I just knew of certain individuals that seemed to have a problem.
But what have we heard lately?
But since leaving, and in recent years, we hear people who are in Bethel, and they say, alcohol, big problem. Prescription drugs, big problem. Depression, people anxious. We had a person come to the door who was coming regularly, a pioneer, and she said, the people are under a lot of stress. Witnesses are under a lot of stress right now. Just out of the blue, she said that to us.
Yeah, that's about 6-7 years ago now, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's when this book is written.
It is a problem.
This book is written or published in 2018, and they're obviously dealing with a ongoing problem that is becoming maybe endemic by 2018, that the people who were hanging on in 1975 now are very old. Yeah,
we had another couple who were in Bethel say people are hanging on with their fingernails. Yeah, somebody who had been in Bethel in the Far East. Yeah. And then we hear through other contacts that people who are in New York Bethel. It's the same situation everywhere, apparently. Yeah. So I do think we have to think about this as ex-witnesses, and this is kind of a call out to Christians as well. That if the Watchtower is increasing in this number, there's going to be a real fallout of people who are going to need support and help, and they're going to be they're not going to be happy people looking for truth. They're going to be miserable people, depressed, bitter, anxious, distrustful. So is the church ready for that? Yep. They're going to need a lot of help. And so we would like to say a call out for Christians to become more aware of the teachings of the witnesses, learn how to just befriend them and be loving, but expect it not to be too pleasant for a while. After all, we've been praying for this crash, this collapse of the Watchtower for 30-something years. Yeah, and we shouldn't be unhappy when it's happening, but are we ready for that, the fallout? Yeah, they're going to need a lot of support and help. And the truth is in the verse they cite, although they don't quote it here, which is, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. But who is him? It's not a bunch of men in New York. It's it's God and Jesus. If you just read the context of Philippians 4, and remember Paul's in jail. This is the joy epistle, and he writes it from jail in Rome. Yeah. So then you think, well, where does he get his strength? There was no organization to strengthen them. Several of his letters, he makes the claim that he's alone. In his last letter, he says, only Luke is with me. So it's not an organization that's comforting him. It's the Lord himself. Yeah. What's our link? We're linking to a Ray Franz video where he talks about this problem in his day. So he's saying devout JW's far more prone to depression. And then after you watch that video, click on the one that follows it about Clarissa. Clarissa, what a story. A heartbreaking story. But it shows you that this has been going on for a long time. throughout the history of the Watchtower.
Yeah. See you soon.
Mm-hmm.